Frank Borman and Jim Lovell were both astronauts for NASA during the Gemini and Apollo programs. Frank Borman was a member of the Gemini 7 mission in 1965, along with Jim Lovell. The Gemini 7 mission was a spaceflight that lasted for nearly 14 days, making it the longest crewed spaceflight up to that point. Borman and Lovell orbited the Earth for 2 weeks, conducting experiments and testing spacecraft systems in preparation for future Apollo missions. Jim Lovell also went on to fly on the Apollo missions. He was the pilot of the Apollo 8 mission, which was the first manned spacecraft to orbit the Moon in December 1968. Lovell later commanded the Apollo 13 mission in 1970, which famously experienced an explosion in one of its oxygen tanks, forcing the crew to abort their mission and focus on safely returning to Earth. Frank Borman was born on March 14, 1928, in Gary, Indiana. He served as a fighter pilot in the United States Air Force before being selected as an astronaut by NASA in 1962. After the Gemini 7 mission, Borman went on to command the Apollo 8 mission in 1968, becoming one of the first humans to see the far side of the Moon. He retired from NASA and the Air Force in 1970 and later served as the CEO of Eastern Airlines from 1975 to 1986. Jim Lovell was born on March 25, 1928, in Cleveland, Ohio. He was a naval aviator before being selected as an astronaut by NASA in 1962. After the Gemini 7 mission, Lovell also flew on the Gemini 12 mission in 1966, where he performed a spacewalk. In addition to his role on Apollo 8 and Apollo 13, Lovell was also the backup commander for the Apollo 11 mission, which famously landed humans on the Moon for the first time in 1969. Lovell retired from NASA and the Navy in 1973 and later wrote several books about his experiences in space. Both Borman and Lovell played important roles in the early years of human spaceflight and contributed to our understanding of space exploration. Frank Borman was a veteran of the Korean War and flew combat missions as a fighter pilot. He was also an accomplished test pilot, having flown over 6,000 hours in over 30 different types of aircraft. After leaving NASA, Borman went on to work in the private sector and became a successful businessman. He also served on various government advisory boards and was a member of the National Commission on Space in the 1980s. Jim Lovell also had an impressive military career before joining NASA. He served as a test pilot for the Navy and flew over 100 different types of aircraft. Lovell was also an instructor at the Navy's Test Pilot School. After leaving NASA, he founded a company that provided training and consulting services for aerospace and aviation industries. Lovell has also been an advocate for space exploration and has been involved in various organizations promoting space travel and scientific discovery. Both Borman and Lovell have received numerous honors and awards for their contributions to space exploration, including the Congressional Space Medal of Honor. They are both considered to be pioneering astronauts and have inspired generations of space enthusiasts and explorers. Frank Borman was the first commander of the Apollo 8 mission, which was the first human mission to orbit the Moon. During this mission, Borman and his crewmates, Jim Lovell and Bill Anders, famously read from the Book of Genesis during a live broadcast on Christmas Eve, 1968. Jim Lovell was originally scheduled to be the commander of the Apollo 14 mission, but he was bumped up to the Apollo 13 mission when the original commander, Alan Shepard, was diagnosed with an inner ear disorder. Lovell was in space during the infamous explosion that crippled the spacecraft and forced the crew to improvise a plan to return safely to Earth. After the Gemini 7 mission, Frank Borman briefly retired from NASA before returning to fly on the Apollo 8 mission. During his time away from NASA, he served as a special assistant to the director of the Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. Jim Lovell was portrayed by actor Tom Hanks in the 1995 movie, Apollo 13, which chronicled the events of the ill-fated mission. Lovell himself had a cameo in the movie as the captain of the USS Iwo Jima, the ship that helped recover the Apollo 13 crew after their splashdown in the Pacific Ocean. Both Borman and Lovell have been inducted into the U.S. Astronaut Hall of Fame for their contributions to space exploration. They have also received numerous other honors and awards for their service to their country and their dedication to the pursuit of scientific discovery. In addition to his roles as a fighter pilot, astronaut, and businessman, Frank Borman also served as a member of the Presidential Commission on the Space Shuttle Challenger accident in 1986. The commission was tasked with investigating the causes of the Challenger disaster and making recommendations for future space missions. Jim Lovell holds the record for the most time spent in space by an American astronaut at the time of his retirement. He logged a total of 715 hours and 5 minutes in space over the course of 4 missions. Both Borman and Lovell have been recognized for their contributions to education and public service. Borman has served as a trustee of the National Geographic Society and the California Institute of Technology, while Lovell has been involved with various organizations promoting science education and has served on the board of directors of the Astronaut Scholarship Foundation. Borman and Lovell have remained close friends since their days as astronauts, and they have continued to work together on various projects and initiatives related to space exploration. In 2008, they both served as advisors to NASA's Constellation program, which was aimed at developing a new generation of spacecraft for future missions to the Moon and Mars. Frank Borman is also known for his involvement in the famous Christmas message during the Apollo 8 mission. The message, which Borman and his crewmates read from the Book of Genesis, is considered to be one of the most iconic moments in the history of space exploration. Borman has described the experience as a powerful reminder of the unity of humanity and the need to work together to achieve common goals. Frank Borman was selected as an astronaut in 1962 as part of the second group of NASA astronauts, which included famous astronauts such as Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin. Borman was the first member of this group to fly in space, on the Gemini 7 mission in 1965. Jim Lovell was originally a backup astronaut for the Gemini 4 mission, but he was later selected to fly on the Gemini 7 mission with Frank Borman. Lovell and Borman spent a record-breaking 14 days in space, which was the longest manned spaceflight at the time. Frank Borman and Jim Lovell both grew up during the Great Depression and World War II. Borman was born in 1928 in Gary, Indiana, and Lovell was born in 1928 in Cleveland, Ohio. Both Borman and Lovell were inspired to become astronauts by the launch of the first artificial satellite, Sputnik, by the Soviet Union in 1957. Borman has said that he was motivated by a desire to show that the United States could compete with the Soviet Union in the space race, while Lovell was drawn to the challenge and excitement of space exploration. In addition to their accomplishment, the perilous voyage of Apollo 13 inches in 1994. The latter book served as the basis for the movie, Apollo 13. Jim Lovell is also known for his famous quote during the Apollo 13 mission, "Houston, we have a problem." Was also the commander of the Apollo 9 mission, which tested the lunar module in Earth orbit in preparation for the Apollo 11 mission. During this mission, Borman and his crewmate, Bill Anders, took the first color photographs of Earth from space. Jim Lovell was also part of the first crew to fly in the Lunar Landing Research Vehicle, LLRV, a prototype vehicle designed to simulate the conditions of landing on the Moon. Lovell had a close call during a training session when the LLRV malfunctioned and he had to eject from the vehicle, but he escaped without serious injury. Both Borman and Lovell have received numerous honors and awards for their contributions to space exploration, including the Congressional Space Medal of Honor, the highest award given to U.S. astronauts. Borman also received the Harmon International Trophy in 1965 for his role in the Gemini 7 mission, while Lovell received the Tony Jannus Award for his contributions to commercial aviation in 2003. After retiring from NASA, Frank Borman went on to a successful career in business, serving as the chairman and CEO of Eastern Airlines from 1975 to 1986. He was also a member of the board of directors of several other companies, including Johnson & Johnson and the Home Depot. Jim Lovell has been involved with various organizations promoting space exploration and education, including the Planetary Society and the Adler Planetarium in Chicago. He also served as the commander of the U.S. Navy's test pilot school and was a test pilot for several aircraft, including the F-14 Tomcat. Both Borman and Lovell have been involved with efforts to preserve the legacy of the Apollo program and inspire future generations of space explorers. In 2019, they joined forces with other Apollo astronauts T.